South Korean professional killer. This was not the first time the police found the body of a woman in Hwaseong City wearing red clothes, with her hands and mouth tied, using her own underwear. A horrifying image that showed a serial killer in South Korea had no intention of stopping his killings. The Hwaseong serial murder case began in 1986. It started when a 71-year-old woman suddenly disappeared, and 6 days later, her body was found in a forest. This was the beginning of one of the most terrifying criminal cases in South Korea, which left the police unable to catch the serial killer. 5 days after the discovery of her body, about 6 kilometers away in another forest, the bodies of 4 young women were found, all with their underwear on, hands and mouths tied, and after being sexually assaulted, murdered. The bodies of the girls were not only found in the forest. One of the bodies was discovered here, under a small agricultural bridge, with significant decomposition due to the time passed since death. The police began extensive investigations to catch the killer, but there was no trace of him. Even the footprints at the crime scenes were of no help. Media pressure increased, and the police needed to show a killer to the public, so a man with mental instability was arrested, and they tried to blame him for the murders, but it was ineffective. The killings continued, and bodies were found one after another. It was even reported that pieces of peaches along with their pits were found inside one of the victims' bodies. The police were becoming more and more confused. The case made no progress, and the killer left no traces after the murders, except inside the bodies of the female victims. The police were able to find several DNA samples of the killer inside the women, but suddenly, a miraculous breakthrough occurred in the case. On September 7, 1988, a bus driver claimed to have seen the killer before he murdered one of the women. He was confident that he could identify him. The characteristics of this suspect, which had been described by the bus driver, largely matched those of other victims who had been sexually assaulted by the offender. According to the statements of the victims, at the time of the incidents, the offender was a slim man in his mid-20s, with a height between 165 and 170 centimeters and short sporty hair. In the description of his face, it was said that he was a young man without double eyelids and with a sharp nose. In addition to this, his hands were described as very soft, but it was completely useless. The police repeatedly set traps to catch the killer, but even once, when they were close, he escaped. An escape that cost the Hwaseong police dearly because the killings continued, and the case file grew larger. No girl in Hwaseong dared to wear red clothes anymore, but suddenly, from 1991, the killing stopped, although the case remained open. The police arrested more suspects, reaching 21,000 people by 2019. More than 40,000 fingerprints were collected for this case. 3 people even suffered strokes during the often harsh interrogations. For the first time, a new trick was used to catch a serial killer. The police secretly asked a director named Bong Joon-ho to make a fictional film based on the case documents. The film, eventually released as Memories of Murder, became very popular. The police confirmed that the film was based on South Korea's most famous serial killer case. All this was intended to lure the killer to watch his own film in a cinema, at which point the police could finally arrest him after 30 years. The film became so popular that it is now among IMDb's top 250 films, yet the killer never came to see it. The police were more confused than ever. By 2019, the case remained open. But could a serial killer who assaulted and murdered women simply stop? No new murders had occurred for 28 years. Was a killer dead? But that was not the only possibility. Therefore, the South Korean police considered that the killer might have fled to another country, and they began reviewing murder cases worldwide to find any similar patterns. They requested help from South Korean embassies all over the world, but there was no result. The killer had disappeared without a trace. Suddenly, a new idea emerged. What if the killer had been in prison in 1991 for a serious crime? The police, using the DNA samples they had, tested all prisoners who had been convicted of serious crimes in 1991. The killer was in prison. Lee Choon-jae, who is now known as South Korea's most notorious serial killer, was born in 1963. According to his mother, he was a kind and lovable boy. His personality began to change after losing his brother to illness, and this was the beginning of the formation of South Korea's most horrifying killer. Lee joined the military at the age of 20, and from 1986, while married, he began his serial killings. In 1989, he committed a theft that led to his arrest in 1990. Lee was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison, but later in subsequent trials he obtained parole. The killings stopped because Lee believed he was under surveillance. After Lee's wife, who had repeatedly been beaten by him, left him in December 1993, he invited his 18-year-old sister-in-law to the house, and then on January 13, 1994, he drugged, assaulted, and killed her. According to the detective in charge of the case, Lee went to his father-in-law and offered to help them search for the sister-in-law. Both of them went to the police and claimed that someone had probably kidnapped the girl. A few days later, on January 18th, Lee was arrested. After repeated interrogations, Lee had asked, "What is the sentence for rape and murder? How many years in prison?" Lee denied any responsibility for the murder, saying he had given false statements under police pressure and the court invalidated his confession. However, in May 1994, Lee was sentenced to death, and his conviction was upheld in September of the same year. The Supreme Court of South Korea reviewed the case again in 1995, and Lee's sentence was reduced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Now Lee Choon-jae faced new charges. After enough evidence identified him, he confessed to 15 murders and 30 assaults, of which 14 murders included 9 in Hwaseong, which led to his life imprisonment. He is currently serving his sentence in a high-security prison in Busan, where he will remain for the rest of his life. In one of the court sessions, Lee stated that he had no reason to kill the women and found it strange that he had not been arrested back then. He claimed that after each murder, he waited for the police to come and arrest him.